binding. That's going to be the part that goes around your quilt block right here. And let me just preface binding with there's lots of different methods. There's lots of different ways that you can bind. And so this is my method that has made it really simple for me. It used to be something that I was really scared to bind and afraid of doing it wrong. And I found a method that works for me. And I urge you to do the same when you bind, because there's lots of different methods, like I said, and you can do hand binding or you can do machine binding. This method that I'm going to show you today is the way that I do machine binding. All right, so let's get started. First, you're going to need to cut your binding strip. For a small project like this, I prefer a 2-inch binding strip. For a quilt, I use a 2.5-inch binding strip. And what you're going to do for this method is I am going to take my edge right here and I'm just going to fold it in at a 90-degree angle. That's going to give you a slanted binding. The way I did this, you can see it's a straight fold. You can also do that by folding this down and doing it straight. But this time I'm going to show you how to do it at an angle like that. And we're just going to go ahead and we are going to press this entire strip. We're going to press it wrong sides together. So that is the dull side of the fabric are going to be facing each other. And the bright, vibrant side is facing outwards. So we're just going to go ahead and we are going to press this binding strip in half. I have my binding strip all pressed, and now we're going to add it to our block. Now, when we're doing this, we're going to want to make sure as we're sewing in our binding strip that we're going to sew the twine from our Grow swag into the binding. And when I start my binding, I like to start in the center of my project, not too close to an edge, because that will make it hard to join your binding at the end. And I am just going to go ahead and sew a 1/4 inch around my panel. And we're sewing it with the raw edge, you can see that, facing the edge. So raw edge and raw edge. My folded side is facing inside. So let's go ahead and take it to the machine and get started. All right, when you start binding, you're going to want to leave a tail so that you can join your binding strips together when you get to the end. And so I'm actually going to give myself a little bit of wiggle room, and I'm going to start right about here. So I'm not sewing this portion down yet. And I'm just going to take it over here to my machine and get started sewing around the edge. I'm sewing the binding on. Now make sure that you leave that binding open about 2 inches so that you'll be able to do the tuck method when you come back to the end of that. I didn't do it on this, and so make sure that you do that step. All right, we're going to stop for our binding at a 1/4 inch at the end of your quilt block on all 4 sides. This is going to help with those mitered corners. It's a very important step. So a 1/4 inch. Then we're going to take and we're going to fold the fabric up towards the top and then fold it back down and then start sewing again. Now we have that corner folded. We're just going to go ahead and we're taking it back to the sewing machine, and we're going to go ahead and sew straight on down. And then again, we're going to stop a 1/4 inch from the end, and we're going to repeat the same steps. Here, I just wanted to give you one more view of how to do your binding edge to get that mitered corner. So you can see you fold it up and then you bring it down, and then you're going to sew a 1/4 inch from the top down to the bottom. Now we're all the way around the quilt block, so we're going to tuck this tail into the beginning where we started our binding. So you can see I'm just going to cut this at an angle, and then I am going to fold this into that tuck to finish it off. Make sure you don't have any bunching, so you might have to mess around with it a little bit, but go ahead and tuck that in, and then we're going to go ahead and finish it off by taking it back to the sewing machine. One tip to help with your mitered corners is to go ahead and just snip off a tiny, tiny bit on each of your corners. That's going to help so that you don't have as much bulk in the corners as you go to do your mitered corners. It's the last step in our binding, so we're going to go ahead and fold that over so that it covers our seam of where we originally sewed that binding on. And we're just going to fold it over, and you can see those edges will fold over 90 degrees, and they should just nicely lay that way. And that's what will create your mitered corner. So I go ahead and I pin my binding. You can use binding clips. You can even use like a binding glue, which is really helpful. This is where you can choose to use a machine, which is my preferred method, which I'm doing here, where I flip it over and I stitch in the ditch to go ahead and secure that binding on. Or you can do it by hand by sewing on that binding on the back side with a hand stitch. Totally up to you and what your preferred method is. One tip I have is that your binding mitered corners will lay a lot flatter if you do opposite of the fold on the front. And that is just one trick that I have found that will make that mitered corner really, really nice, and it won't be, it will make it effortless is how I should say it. So do your mitered fold opposite of the fold on the front. It's the last step. We're going to add on that grosgrain ribbon so we have something to tie that onto our watering can. So I've taken the grosgrain ribbon edge and I have folded it over twice so that it has a nice finish edge on it. Then I'm pinning it onto the middle of that quilt block, and now I'm going to flip it over and I'm going to sew it in place by stitching in the ditch on the front side to hide that sewing stitch and secure it onto each side of the panel. It's as easy as that. Once you finish this, you are done and you're ready to tie it onto your watering can. Thank you so much for joining me in class, and I hope that you had so much fun and learned a few new things. So thanks for supporting us, and don't forget to like and subscribe to our YouTube channel.